Hello there. I'm Kevin of 11 Philip from St. John's Catholic School, here to elaborate and explain about Indonesia's colonization period and its struggle towards independence. Let's understand first the concept of the word colonization. By definition, it is control of one power over a dependent group of people, or specifically over a certain country, in this case. So, how does one colonize one another? Well, a country must bring their own army with certain number of infantry and reinforcements, fly to their designated targets, land, load up, and begin their rampage there. They colonize the people there by certain ways, such as training them, recruiting them to fight for them as an army, enslaving them, and so on, to do their dirty work for them, and simply just supervise to ensure that they're doing each of their jobs. Otherwise, they would just get murdered without any proper reason. So back then, colonization was very popular to obtain national resources offshore, which they cannot find on their own countries, because some countries might have what another country might not have in their own land. So Indonesia was first colonized by the Netherlands by a group of campaign called the VOC, led by Cornelis de Houtman of the Dutch, which voyaged to Java Island in 1595. The VOC was first established, though, in 1602, and the main purposes of this campaign were to protect the trade in the Indian Oceans back then, and to assist the War of Independence from the Spain. VOC was in search of Indonesian spices. At the time, the most common spices were clovers. The people of Indonesians, or our ancestors, were forced to work for the Netherlands, or back then until nowadays, people call it kerja rodi. VOC began the spice trade in East Indies, or also known as Indonesia, for almost 35 decades, from 1602 to 1949. But in 1940, the Dutch returned to their base camp when the Germans occupied their territory and colonized them. They had to go back there just to defend their land. And in the early 17th centuries, there were three wars between East Indies and the Dutch. First war was led by Suropati and a group of natives to fight the Dutch back. The second war was led by Pakubuwono, who died when fighting to protect his own throne. And the third war was King Pakubuwono III, who fought two challenges to the throne. Pakubuwono eventually won and obtained and gained his right to rule over half of Mataram kingdom. Japan colonizes Indonesia right after the Netherlands returned to their home. It happened as well during 1942, from 1942 to 1945, during the Second World War. Less than 3 months after the attack on Borneo, the Japanese Navy and Army outnumbered and overran the Dutch, which forced the Dutch, of course, to return back to defend their own state, which also was occupied by the Germans. Same like the Dutch, our ancestors was forced to enter into the world of slavery, or as the Japanese called it, romusha. The Japanese educated, trained, and armed many young Indonesians and give their nationalist leaders a political voice for their own their own political interest. Due to the destruction or the end of Dutch regime, Japan promised Indonesia their proclamation and will lead them then to independence during the time after they surrender. What's interesting though, Japan was the only country in Asia that successfully transformed into a modern technological society at the end of the 19th century, which they used to maintain its power and strengthen them. Japan ended the raid in Indonesia after discovering that General MacArthur of the Great Britain wished to fight his way with the Allies to liberate Java, but not ordered by President Roosevelt. Sukarno struggle. Sukarno was one of the most memorable hero of Indonesia. First, he's the very first president of Indonesia, and Sukarno had useful and great principles in his life. Due to his background when he grew up in a school with soft and kind-hearted character, which allowed him to survive his teenage life in a Netherlands boarding school, Hogere Burgerschule, where he was spat on, bullied, and underestimated by other Holland students at school. This led to the growth of the leadership soul of Sukarno, which then fought his best to ensure Indonesia as an independent state free from colonization. Then, Sukarno joined forces and created a highly strategic rebellion to fight off the Netherlands and Japan from Indonesia from 1921 to 1942. Oh, sorry, it was just the Netherlands. He joined in allegiance with some famous nationalists and some famous heroes that we know until now, with high sense of nationalism and pride for Indonesia. 3 of the known heroes were Ki Hajar Dewantara, Doos Dekker, or people nowadays mostly known him as Setiabudi, and Cipto Mangunkusumo. The rebellion was called at the time Indische Partij. At the age of 21, Sukarno stood in front of the Netherlands by himself fearlessly, dauntlessly, and rejected the assembly of the petitions to claim Indonesia belongs rightly, politically, and legally to the Netherlands, suggesting a totally non-cooperative movement against the government of India. Then Sukarno went to Bandung to hold a speech to the people there to convince that Indonesia will soon be free. With his associates, he organized Algemene Studi Club, which was a spectacular political movement to fight off the Dutch, until establishing a new party, PNI, on the 4th of July in 1927. PNI and Sukarno were unfortunately then imprisoned by the Dutch government on May 29th of 1929 due to his attempt to fight off the colonialism of the Netherlands. Now we'll get to the state where Indonesia's independence is achieved. Proclaimed by President Sukarno and his Vice President Muhammad Hatta, stating that Indonesia acquires its independence for good and will no longer be colonized by any countries by any circumstances, and will have peace restored amongst other countries and justice served to the world, causing the end of World War II. Officially, Indonesia was independent on the 17th of August in 1945. The movement of Indonesia independence started to occur in May 1908, also commemorated as Hari Kebangkitan Nasional. In the first half of the 20th century, Indonesian nationalism and movements which supports independence from the Netherlands were namely Sarekat Dagang Islam or SDI, PNI, PKI, and Budi Utomo grew quick and rapidly. Sarekat Dagang Islam, Budi Utomo, and others took the cooperative strategy by joining the Dutch as the Initiated Volksraad, or also translated to the People's Council, which was hoped to grant Indonesia independence over them. Others took the non-cooperative way to demand freedom of self-government from Dutch East Indies colony. Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta, the two nationalist leaders who fought and brought Indonesia to the brink of independence, who had benefited themselves from the national educational reforms of the Dutch ethical policy, were indeed the most notable among other leaders who fought for Indonesia's independence. This independence caused also a new ideology for us, which was Pancasila. Pancasila was the official ideology of Indonesia, discussed by Panitia 9. Derived from two old Sanskrit languages, Pancha means 5 and Sila means principles. Pancasila simply means 5 principles of Indonesia. The first one, ketuhanan yang Maha Esa. The second one, kemanusiaan yang adil dan beradab. The third, persatuan Indonesia. The fourth, kerakyatan yang dipimpin oleh hikmat kebijaksanaan dalam permusyawaratan perwakilan. And the fifth, keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia. As mentioned earlier, this was established by the 9 committees by exchanging their thoughts and ideas of what the best ideology of Indonesia for the upcoming years of their independence should best be. Presented aloud by Sukarno on the 1st June of 1945 as the birth of Indonesia's true and official foundation. Undang-Undang Dasar 1945. This is the basis of Pancasila itself. Without it, there would be no Pancasila. It states the independence and official freedom of Indonesia from any colonizations in the world after World War II. This is a firm and strong standing integrity of our very own country, Indonesia, and was chosen and established constitution most suitable for Indonesians, especially in the globalization era. Why? Because this brings people together with all of our differences here in Indonesia. Given that our races, religion, beliefs, culture, and so many other aspects more are diverse here. Proklamasi, or proclamation in English. It proclaims the independence of Indonesia, which was read aloud by Sukarno, with Muhammad Hatta accompanying him on his side, on the 17th August 1945, or during the independence of Indonesia. The text is below. Proklamasi. Kami, bangsa Indonesia, dengan ini menyatakan kemerdekaan Indonesia. Hal-hal yang mengenai pemindahan kekuasaan dan lain-lain diselenggarakan dengan cara yang seksama dan dalam tempo yang sesingkat-singkatnya. Jakarta, hari 17 bulan 8 tahun 45, atas nama bangsa Indonesia, Soekarno-Hatta. The text was so because it followed the way how the Netherlands wrote it down. But now it's changed. Indonesia was recognized by a lot of countries. Specifically here, I'm gonna explain only 2. First, the Netherlands. The Netherlands recognized Indonesia as an independent republic on the 27th December after agreed upon the Dutch-Indonesian Roundtable Conference in The Hague or Den Haag in the Netherlands. From the 23rd of August until November 2nd in 1949, approved by the Queen of the Netherlands. Next is the USA, or the America, who noticed Indonesia's independence on December 28, 1949, when H. Merle Cochran, the U.S. ambassador, presented his credentials and message of congratulations of Indonesia's independence from President Harry S. Truman to President Sukarno of Indonesia. And here, I'm just going to explain some of our heroes, some of our top 10 heroes' sacrifices for our country. Beginning from Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta. Sukarno as the proclamator and the president of Indonesia's independence, who dauntlessly fight of the Netherlands, even if he was imprisoned back then. Muhammad Hatta, who was a friend, a politician, and a partner of Sukarno, who stuck with him and struggled together. General Sudirman, who apparently was the first and the youngest general in the end of 1948, who protected Indonesia's ground until his death. Prince Diponegoro or Pangeran Diponegoro led the war, which was named Diponegoro War. He sacrificed himself the most from wars, and was given recognition to be one of Indonesia's university, namely Undip or Universitas Diponegoro. The fifth was Tuanku Imam Bonjol, whose picture you could see in the old 5,000 rupiah money. He fought off against colonizers during Perang Padri in the western region of Sumatra Island in Indonesia. Raden Ajeng Kartini, who fought and struggled for the rights of all women in Indonesia. Cut Nyak Dien, a woman who once led an army to go resist the Netherlands during the Battle of Aceh. Dewi Sartika, who worked hard for the sake of opening the first school for women along the Dutch East Indies. Martha Christina Tiahahu showed great courage as she not only fought against the Netherlands, but she stood her ground and drew her very own firearm against the Dutch army. And the 10th is Nyi Ageng Serang, who led her troops to arrest an army of Dutch soldiers against the region of Serang. Now it's time for some trivia. With whom did Sukarno join forces to fight the Dutch from 1921 to 1942? There were three back then famous nationalists, namely Ki Hajar Dewantara, Dewes Dekker, and Cipto Mangunkusumo. Second question. When and why did the Netherlands return to their base? If you remember, there are two reasons. Their base was attacked by Germany in 1940, and Japan occupied Indonesia and beat the Netherlands to it in 1940 as well, which forced the Netherlands to go back to their home base to defend their very land. The purposes of VOC comes next, which were to protect the trade that happened at that time in the Indian Oceans and to assist the War of Independence from Spain. Sorry, my bad. The fourth, Algemene Study Club was established into blah 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 in the ASC was established or changed into a new party called PNI on the 4th of July in 1927. And last question. The three wars between the Dutch and the East Indies that happened during the time of the Netherlands colonization in Indonesia is the first war, which was led by Suropati and a group of natives to fight the Dutch. The second war was the death of Pakubuwono, who fought to protect his crown or throne. And the third was the war when King Pakubuwono III fought two challengers to defend his throne, which led him to win and obtain his right to rule over Mataram Kingdom. These are the sources in which I found my information at. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening for this 19 minutes, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.